Welcome to Vital Voices of the Environment, a Marstel Day production. This is Rebecca Rubin. The following is an interview with Lynn Scarlett, former Deputy Secretary and Chief Operating Officer of the U.S. Department of the Interior from 2005 to 2009. She is now a visiting scholar at Resources for the Future in Washington, D.C., and an environmental analyst working on climate change adaptation, ecosystem services, water, landscape scale conservation, and science and decision-making. In 2009, she served as a visiting lecturer on climate change at the University of California Bren School of Environmental Science and Management. She is a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration. She became Deputy Secretary of the Interior Department after serving for 4 years as the department's Assistant Secretary for Policy, Management, and Budget. She chaired the department's Climate Change Task Force and now serves on the National Commission on Climate and Tropical Forests. She is the author of numerous publications on incentive-based environmental policies. Her most recent publication, Green, Clean, and Dollar Smart on Urban Greening, was published in February 2010 by the Environmental Defense Fund. She serves on the board of the American Hiking Society, the Continental Divide Trail Alliance, and Resolve, and is a trustee emeritus of the Udall Foundation. She received her BA and MA in political science from the University of California, Santa Barbara. She is an avid hiker, canoe enthusiast, and birder. Lynn, thank you for being with us on Vital Voices of the Environment.
I'm just delighted to be with you, Rebecca.
Can you tell us if there has been anything for you that's been transformational in terms of how you think about the environment and how you think about your environmental leadership role in that context?
Early on, my life outside canoeing and hiking and birding was transformational in the sense of putting environment on my mental map as part of who I am. But I have to say that for me, my 8 years at the Interior Department was a little bit of an additional wake-up call. A wake-up call to realize how hard conservation is. A second, I think, very important influence, I don't know if I'd exactly call it a turning point, was my years as the Chief Budget Officer for the Department of the Interior, and realizing how incredibly difficult it was for conservation purposes to compete in the myriad of other value sets that the federal government expended funds on. And I think that further ignited my resolve to really carry forth with a strong voice on these issues. I think as we hit the 21st century, there's a growing understanding that if we had ever-increasing specializations and segregation of issues, compartmentalization in the latter part of the 20th century, that nature knows no boundaries, that as Barry Commoner once said, there's an interconnectedness to everything. So we need to put Humpty Dumpty together again. We need to reintegrate.
It also sounds from what you've just said that it helps take some of the compliance focus out of the solution set.
It does. The compliance focus has a role, and I always am cautious about talking about collaboration because sometimes people think by focusing on collaboration, one is repudiating the compliance. There is a role, but if we're going to engage a nation of citizen stewards, whether it's in the business world and factories and industry, or whether it's on lands, we need to inspire citizen stewards to want to participate. And that means not always leading with the stick, but leading with the invitation to communicate. I think for some reasons that still are somewhat of a mystery to me, we as a nation tend to think of economy and community, peopled landscapes, and the actions that we undertake in our economic transactions as separate from environment. That somehow economy is over here on one side, and by golly, that's of course important to human prosperity, to human progress in the arts, in education, in health. And we think of environment as over here, and that they somehow are in competition rather than intimately integrated. I think that really is a mistaken framework.
What do you think about the whole sort of ecosystem services realm, and how seriously should we be taking it? What parts of it are worth hanging on to, and what parts should be questioned?
The very concept of ecosystem services really is premised on the idea that nature has value and that we can monetize those values so that we can take those into account as we think about different management choices. My concern is not so much that we strive to do that, because from a decision-making standpoint that can be helpful. My concern is that we reduce all decision-making to a comparison of those dollar values and perhaps really forget the importance of those natural places beyond the services that they provide to human communities.
So some things have immeasurable benefits, literally.
Yes.
When you sort of think about your history, everything you've brought to the table from a conservation standpoint, what do you think of as being your single greatest contribution to the natural environment?
I think, for me, I really am pleased that I was able, in my 8 years at the Interior Department, to strengthen the notion of the importance of cooperative conservation. So that does not refer to a single location and a single land preserved, but rather a concept that I think has deepened and broadened.
Now I have to ask the question, when you look at the budget for Interior relative to the budget for, say, the Defense Department, how does that rack and stack in your mind?
Well, it doesn't rack and stack very well. The department manages 1 in every 5 acres of the United States, 20%. Many major river systems. The idea that we do that with that sort of a budget, I think, is astonishing. I used to lament, holy smokes, give me one windshield wiper from the Department of Defense, and with the cost of that, I could make a world of difference in the Department of the Interior. Now, I do understand that an administration, any administration, Bush administration, the Obama administration, and all those that came before and will come after, face scarcity. There's always more to do than there are resources to allocate. So I understand that there is a balancing act, there are trade-offs to make. I just ask this nation, and I just ask those who govern this nation, are we really adequately investing in these lands?
Does the Interior Department have a leadership role in terms of environment conservation, land management, and climate issues in the nation today?
You know, I think the department has an enormous role. Interior has a presence, it has a land base, it has skill sets in all these communities. And that means that I think they play a tremendous role for the nation, not only on climate adaptation, but conservation in general. But there's another aspect that I think the Department of the Interior holds with respect to leadership. It has some skill sets that should allow it to help show the way for the nation to lighten its environmental footprint in how it manages the intersection of people and place. So our parks are a great place or set of places to use alternative energy and see what functions well and cost effectively, because they don't have an endless supply of money as we've just described. So they have to have cost effective energy solutions. They are a place to experiment with greening of built infrastructure.